Well, welcome everyone to our very first SLA CIC webinar of 2021. And yes, we are in 2021, something we're going to be spending a good amount of the next hour speaking about. This webinar is going to be on planning for post-pandemic work. And I know some of you are already thinking about that, and I'm hoping some of you may already be vaccinated or otherwise in great shape. And we're going to talk about what we learned from last year that we're applying to this year and what we can do to leverage those learnings. So I've got a really terrific panel that's going to be joining me on this, and we're really excited to have 4 of them. I'll introduce them momentarily, but before I do that, we do have Member Monday coming soon for all of you SLA members. If you have a member of our community, CIC community, that you think is doing outstanding things, and maybe they just haven't gotten the awareness or recognition they deserve, we would certainly encourage you to nominate them. I do remember seeing a lot of these done last year, and it was always neat to learn about some of the new members or maybe newer members that are in the community, many of whom have an awful lot to offer. So Member Monday's coming. We look forward to you joining in on that. Sometimes it's also better to give than receive. So some of you may realize that the CI community has a volunteer board. And for those of you who do realize that, you may also realize that one of the members of that board is actually on our panel today. He happens to be leading it. That's Phil Britton. You'll see his email there below at pbritton@sedulogroup.com. If you'd like to join and be part of the leadership of the community, help it to grow and thrive in 2021 and beyond, we'd certainly love to have you volunteer. There's a number of positions that are waiting for bright, energetic, motivated people like yourself. So don't hesitate to reach out to him. Phil also might be willing to chat with you about the mentorship program that the SLA CIC is also engaged in, and many of the other neat activities besides the webinar that you're part of today. We have another webinar already planned for the third and Frank, third month of the year. And this is one I happen to have a particular great interest in because I've seen these individuals present on this topic. It's kind of boosting your CI toolkit and how to do some really great financial analysis. It's going to be led by Ryan McCumber, who's Senior Director of Market Intelligence at Best Buy. And again, we have a link with that particular organization in our panel today. But having seen Ryan present on this topic, it is he is an outstanding presenter. He knows this stuff solid, cold, backward, and forward. And Rosanna as well, the information research scientist at the Hershey Company. They're going to give you a tour of financial analysis. This isn't meant for people to have MIT level IQs necessarily, but what do you need to know in order to help your information clients be successful? How can you point them out to the right things? How do you know you're looking at the right ratios? How do you know the statements that you're looking at are the ones that are pertinent and germane to their needs? Well, Ryan and Rosanna, they're going to help you do that. So really excellent way to build up your CI toolkit. We hope you'll join us. I'll try to do a reminder before we finish today on that. But that will be happening March 24th, same bat channel and same way of registration that you used for today's particular chat. Another thing I'll just note for you, we always try to get people to reach out to their colleagues to join the SLA CIC community. We do it through things like we're doing today. Obviously, we do have a Twitter channel that you can use. It's at SLA_CIC. Some of you may be using it even now to let people know that we're having this webinar today, but please feel free to use that. And if you know anybody, that's unaware of all the benefits that come from being an SLA CIC member, we certainly encourage you to let them know. And for those of you who do that, you'll get entered in a draw and you might win something neat, whether it's $25, a gift certificate, or some other mysterious and surprising things that some of our sponsors, including today's sponsor of the webinar, Aurora WDC, offers in doing that. We are going to be live tweeting this session. We often do that. Some of you may know when I'm not moderating, which is most of the time, I'm usually one of the people that's pretty active live tweeting. If you want to do that, you can use the hashtag CIC webinar. that's the way to go. I hope we'll see some of you out there on that. I know when I'm done with the rest of our panel, we'll look forward to seeing what you were tweeting about. For those of you that have questions during the session, you can obviously use our chat pane. Don't hesitate to do that. We are going to dedicate some of the time towards the end, probably about 10 or 15 minutes, to answer your questions. So if you can be patient with us, we'll go ahead and do that for you at that time. And don't hesitate. If you have them during, and every now and then, I'll even interrupt and get those going. So let me introduce our esteemed panel. And I have to tell you, we picked these specifically because they represented a lot of the qualities that we think are going to be essential for success in being an info pro, not only here in 2021, but obviously beyond. I'm going to start off with Stephanie Heyroth Wilcox, and I'm not going to read you what all these folks did, because obviously most of you can read for yourself. I suspect all of you can do that. And to be frank, all of their credentials speak for themselves. But there's a few things about Stephanie that I did want to kind of draw attention to and why she's here in today's panel. First of all, Stephanie's been through a fair amount of change in her life and transition in recent years. She's a great example of resilience, and Stephanie's not only resilient, but she's also very innovative and creative. And some of what she's going to be talking about is going to reflect and refer back to some of those kinds of life changes and professional changes that she's made. She's in a really good place right now, and actually probably compared to many of us, she's also in a much warmer place, being there in Carson City, Nevada. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Carson City, by the way, of course, many of us know it for its wonderful mint that produced some of the best currency and numismatic kinds of outputs during the late 19th century. And for those of you who have ever seen a Carson City silver dollar, I'm sure you can appreciate the wonderful silver rush that happened there and how much that particular spot helped. But she is actually, again, working as a librarian for the Nevada legislature. And boy, and that's the reason we have her on here today. You can imagine being a special librarian in a governmental kind of a context. She's busy. She's real busy. And boy, is she able to help a lot of people. She's a wonderful special librarian, and we're thrilled to have her. So Stephanie, welcome. Tommy Goodwin's our second panelist. Again, Tommy's also been through a lot of transition, and I think in many respects, I've known Tommy like I've known Stephanie for well over a decade, and resilience is kind of one of the first things that come to mind. Tommy's also a leader, and I really think you'll find Tommy's experience and expertise of great value in today's session. Currently, he is the CEO for a company called Miller Weinhold Association Management. Association management. So he works with a lot of associations, and I've seen Tommy actually do a lot of that work. He's been very, very active in the digital universe, leading webinars a lot like this one. I don't think a week goes by, and Tommy, if I'm wrong, you can hold me to this one, but I don't think there's a week that goes by where Tommy's not leading a number of experts and subject matter experts in conversations and discussions around key issues that are pertinent and germane to the communities that he's interacting with, which is a lot of them. He's got a wonderful background, not only in the CI field, but in many respects, I think he also represents kind of the best of leadership in our particular community and certainly among the professionals that are present in it. So welcome, Tommy. Jim Miller is hailing from the Great White North. Some of you may know Jim. Jim has obviously been a very active member of the SLA CIC community, but here again, another very innovative, resilient, creative, bright panel member for today. Jim has recently founded an organization called Your Brain Is Not Full. For those of you who haven't already heard of that or maybe not be aware of it, I'd certainly encourage you to go check it out. And you can see there is the Twitter hash for it down there. Your Brain Isn't Full. You'll see below his own name. He's doing some great things too. And the thing I like so much about Jim, and I think is going to be of great value to our conversation today, is Jim handles transitions well. Jim handles change and transformation, and he doesn't wait for it to happen. He makes it happen. And that's why he's here today. So I'm hoping he also is going to be, again, a great source of diverse experiences and expertise for us. Last and certainly not least is Phil Britton. And many of you in the SLA CIC community are very familiar with Phil, not the least of which because he also has served on its executive committee quite recently. He's actually leading it as we speak. Phil is another individual who's had a very distinguished career, has served in a good number of large corporate kinds of roles and tasks. He was at places like Best Buy. He's been at Ulta Beauty. He wasn't just there. He was actually helping to develop, create, shape, and lead those particular CI operations. Phil was recently inducted as a CI fellow just this last year. We're really thrilled to have him there. And he too has a wonderful level of resilience, innovativeness, and has demonstrated leadership throughout his career. So that's the reason we've got these four people. They're all resilient, they're all creative, they're innovative, and each one of them in their own respects has demonstrated leadership at various points in their careers and continues to do it to this day. So on that note, welcome to our panelists. I'm gonna go ahead and just start us off by setting the table real quickly for us. And I wanted to do this in the way of just kind of what I call the bullish bearish mindset. There are some things as we are here in the first quarter of 2021 that we should be feeling pretty good about. And I am trying to take a global perspective, though I realize the vast majority of our audience today and maybe even later in the asynchronous modes that this will be available to you in are working. So for those of us that are kind of following what's happening, obviously we've got some approved vaccines working. I did check with our panel today. None of us have unfortunately been able to get one of those yet, mostly because we're not yet eligible to get those. But we're hoping that that'll happen sooner rather than later. And wherever you are in the world, we're certainly hoping too that you're staying healthy and hopefully soon going to get access to vaccines so you can keep everyone else around you healthy as well. But you think about it, we've had a year of experience with the pandemic. We thought about back in late 2019, nobody had ever heard of the word coronavirus unless maybe, just maybe, you were actually reading Mandarin and were following it a little bit on the Chinese social media networks. But now everyone's heard of it, no surprise. But the good news is, of course, the worst is behind us. We have gone through at least 3 waves here in North America. There may be another, who knows, but those are behind us. There are, certainly a lessening number of mortalities that we're seeing. We're seeing less transmission. Transmission rates are down in virtually every state, for example, and in many of the provinces in Canada as well. This has been great for those of us that work in a digital world. Those of you who have done digital initiatives, and certainly as information professionals, you've seen your initiatives accelerated. I've heard many of us talk about how things they had thought would take 2 or 3 years actually took 2 or 3 months to get completed. So that's a good sign. There's also a lot of support from the government, as many of you know. There's great fiscal support, a lot of what we call liquidity out there in the system. There is cash that is hopefully going to end up finding its way into the pockets of those who need that cash without getting into the politics of it. And we realize that there's still some uncertainty about when that's going to happen, but there is stimuli. It's been there. Hopefully it'll stay there. There's been a rising focus for those of you that have interest in ESG or environmental, social, and governance initiatives. That's been growing. Information's at the forefront of that. Again, allowing people to participate and be included in initiatives that can help educate, inform, and help them know how, for instance, to navigate the pandemic better. And last but not least, on the bullish side, we've got a growing focus on what we call stakeholder capitalism. It's not just about the investor class, but for anyone who's been watching what's been happening with our friends there at Reddit, and our Redditor gangs that are busy making investments of their own in the stock markets, we're seeing again a major change and shift towards having more participation. All of those things are pointing certainly in the positive direction. Having said that, I did want to let the bear have its growl. The job market isn't neutral. Many of us, even in our profession, for those of us who are tracking the job advertisements and classifieds in our field, well, it's been up and down. Obviously, there are openings. That's the good news. Having said that, there are some sectors that you won't see a lot of those openings. For those of you, for instance, that are information professionals in tourism-related or transportation-related kinds of sectors or fields, times aren't the best, and they may not be getting too much better too quickly either. Certain business sectors are continuing to suffer. I just mentioned 2 of them, but there's no shortage. Those of you who support small businesses or maybe support a university library or maybe even a municipal kind of library context where, you know, you have a lot of people kind of coming in trying to figure out how do they get their next jobs, or what can they do to improve their skill sets or capabilities to, you know, to make their employment a more sure thing. There's going to be no shortage of work for you there. So, you know, what's good news for some is bad news for the other, and vice versa. Some of us recognize too that, you know, as we delay getting shots into arms, there are a number of variants growing among our viruses. That is scary for some of us, where we see those variants originate in places like the UK, South Africa, California, or even in Vancouver. We tend to see those variants are more virulent, and they're also a little bit more morbid, i.e. they spread faster, and sometimes they kill faster too. That's not good signs. But again, they're you know, most of the vaccines, at least to date, that have been approved, the two that we have here in the United States, are expected to provide protection against that. There is slow, uneven vaccination distribution, again, depending on what state and where in those states, and maybe even depending on certain social determinants of health, will let us know whether you have a chance of getting that vaccination sooner or later. There's no shortage of stress levels amongst many of us who are working today. We see mental health issues growing, and, you know, for those of us who are invested in the stock markets, some of us see that they've reached records within the last weeks and days, and some people wonder if we're seeing a bubble. So that's enough for me. I did want to at least set the table just to get us all started and get us thinking about what's happening. I'm going to shift to a chance to get every one of you involved. So we've got a poll that I'd like to get to. It's an easy one, I promise you, just to kind of set the table for you guys. So the poll is now open. I hope you'll see it. You've got an opportunity to answer one of four ways relative to how you're viewing the pandemic here in the present, as of now, as it pertains to your work. So go ahead and answer one of the four. We're going to keep that open for just a minute, and we're going to be having a interview kind of conversation. That's how we've set this up. I'm going to work our panelists through a number of questions. They've had a chance to think about them in advance, so this is not necessarily off the cuff or ad hoc, but they have had some chance to reflect, and they're thinking about what did they get out of, you know, being an information professional in 2020, and how's it kind of impacting what they're doing now and beyond in 2021. All right, so how are we doing on the poll there, Liz?
We've got 66% voted, Craig.
That's pretty good. You know, when we hit 75, can we go ahead and close it and circulate out those results?
Yep, I'll give you guys a couple more seconds.
I'm not sure what you guys are going to think. I have a handful of people I know that I interact with that are viewing this as the 14th month of 2020. So maybe you're one of those.
Couple more seconds. We'll close here in 5 seconds.
Sounds great. So we'll look forward to see where you guys are at. I know some people also kind of wanted to return their first 45 days worth of sampling of 2021. And I don't know if anybody's going to be willing to take it and replace it with 2020, but all right. So what do we got? Let's see where you guys are at. We have those posted yet?
So we've got the poll results showing on the screen, so maybe just for attendees, but we had the largest percentage, Craig, coming through with 64% in it's more of the same from last year. Followed by 25% saying it's a lot better. And then we're tied that it's already worse, or not even sure that it's 2021. So
wow, yeah, exactly. So it is more of the same for about 2/3 of you. Wow, that's not surprised, by the way. Again, maybe that idea of this being the 4th month of the last, you know, the 2nd month of the last year is accurate. So 14 months into 2020 here, and we're going to start with that with our panelists. And I'm going to start with and I'm just doing this randomly, Jim Miller. The question I want to ask you is the first one you're going to see, hopefully coming up on your screen here momentarily, and that's going to be the following. Let's see if I can get you up. There we go. So I want you to think about 2020, and I want you to use one word to describe it. And then I want you to use another word to describe the first 45 days here that you've had in 2021, and just kind of help us identify, is there a gap between the two? And if there is, you know, how big is that gap?
I was gonna use VUCA, but that's actually an acronym, so that doesn't really count. I'm just gonna take one of those. So for 2020, I would actually say uncertainty. I think there was a lot of uncertainty around how long is this going to last, what's this going to do, what is this going to, I'm going to be not unlike the camel, the poll. I'm going to be a bit more optimistic and say 2021 hopeful. I take it from a different perspective in the sense that I'm here north of the border, and our view of things might be a bit different. Even though we're not doing so well on the vaccination front, we're like 51st in the world for percentage of citizens vaccinated, and we've had shipment delays. But I think that we're seeing that progress is being made, right? Like areas are coming out of lockdowns. Stuff is going. Businesses are back reopening. So obviously, certain sectors there's some issues with, but I think that it's becoming a bit more hopeful.
Great. So from uncertainty to hopeful. Phil, how's your 2 words? What's 2020 in that 1 word, and what's the start of 2021?
I think 2020 was anxious. There was so much going on that you just felt like between the pandemic, social unrest in the U.S. Especially, political uncertainty, regardless of which side of the fence you're on. It all just kind of kept building and culminating in what happened in November. And then when you thought it was going to be over, it wasn't over. So it just kept going. So there was just so much anxiety. But I'll echo Jim a little bit and say, you know what, there's some optimism. I feel like with hopefully a little more social norms being applied to politics, hopefully things smooth out there. There's a little less uncertainty. And I also hope that with the vaccine, there's that light at the end of the tunnel. Now, it might not be, the end of the tunnel until summer, but by then we can start to go outside. We can start to pull out of our cocoons. And I feel like for a lot of us that we've adjusted to the tedium of being socially distant. And I'm hoping between the vaccinations and weather, we can start to emerge like beautiful butterflies.
Yeah, there were butterflies. Yeah, butterfly effects have probably happened to a lot of us, right? Where small changes can make a, really kind of disproportionate influence on what's happening, especially in this environment. Hey, Phil spoke of political uncertainty. I'm going to go to Stephanie next, then, who kind of lives, at least professionally, in the world of government and politics. Stephanie, same for you. What was 2021 in 1 word, and what's it looking like so far this year? Uh-oh, I'm not hearing you. You may be on mute there, Stephanie. Uh-oh.
Okay.
There we go. Now we got you. Great. Thank you. All right. So 2020 in 1 word, and so far this year.
Yeah, so I was speaking with the other members of my library, and we were joking, is WTF 1 word? Because that definitely rings through. But, to choose an actual word, chaos really is the best we could come up with. And that we're a library, we're a governmental entity. Everything was based in the building. We were in one place. We were all still working off of desktops, and there's that idea you have to be there accessible for the public. And so when it was like, okay, now we're going to go work from home, it was this, well, how do we even do that, get people able to do that? So there were so many things of how do we transition to that, and planning wasn't really something that could be done. So that kind of brings me to our 2021 is planning routine. The idea that even though you don't know what next week, next month is going to look like, doesn't mean that you can't create 2-3 contingency plans, because at least then, to answer Phil's word of 2021, you can remove some anxiety if you know you have a plan or 3 plans to choose from, depending on how things look like, versus the lack of anything because you're just taking whatever comes at you and dealing with it then. So that's kind of the outlook for 2021 for us.
Outstanding. Well, thank you. And Tommy, you get to see a lot of associations. I mean, especially being in a company that happens to manage the affairs of a lot of these, and you're seeing them all over the world, actually. So similar, your one word for 2020, and how's it looking so far this year?
Well, thanks, Craig, and thanks to everybody who's here today, and for the 64% of you who voted that it was more of the same. Happy March 352nd to you. As we're thinking about 2020, the word that immediately comes to mind is earthquake. Right, earthquakes, they're quick, they're destructive, and when you think about what earthquakes do from an infrastructure perspective, they really shake foundations. And I think 2020 shook all of our foundations. But it does lead to, I think, what we can think about this year, which is about rebuilding, right? You have an opportunity to rebuild, you have an opportunity to do things differently, whether that's business, politics, associations, organizations, or even individually, right? It's about finding a way to build back better and do things differently. And, for those of you out on the West Coast or out in San Francisco, you think about the destructiveness of the earthquake back in, I think it was 1989, but then you kind of drive down the Embarcadero and see, the beautiful changes that were brought about by that destruction. So I think it just reminds us that we've got a chance and an opportunity to do things differently this year and make things better than they were before.
Absolutely. I'm going to stay with you, Tommy, if you don't mind, because that actually is going to lead us into our next question. And that one is, then do you have a work model or theme? So I heard you talk about rebuilding. Is that your kind of professional theme for this coming year?
I think rebuilding is a really, really good theme for the year. And I think it gives us a frame. It was all about survival last year, right? We were trying to work on activities or plans or strategies or tactics that would get you through, the day, the week, the month, right? Because we were all in some ways making it up as we go along. But now I think we have the opportunity to think more sustainably, to think about, work that we're doing, organizations that we're serving and supporting, and recreating something that at least in the near to medium term stands the test of time and helps prepare us for whatever's coming next or whatever the various iterations of next are going to be.
Love it. Yeah, absolutely. And Stephanie, you talked about planning. Is that really kind of your motto or theme for 2021, or is it something else?
I mean that, but also we've actually brought in flexibility. It goes with planning, of course, but looking at how we serve the public, what we have going on with our legislative session right now, and how we are working to bring in as much involvement as we can at various times, and how that's just going to continue to change based on how things are looking with the virus. And so we, encouraging both ourselves and the people that we deal with to be flexible, to keep abreast of the information, because that will help. But then also, really, our motto is a sense of humor. That theme, the personal connection, I think that was really tough. Again, for us in a place where we've always had everyone working in the office, and so you lose that connection when you all spread out and go onto your computers, and you're not used to doing that. And so I think for both the people that we deal with, it's difficult to remember your clients, customers as human individuals, and then losing that connection of this is a fun workplace with your coworkers. And so kind of trying to maintain that sense of humor to all of it.
Well, that's great. And actually, it's a great lead into Phil, because when we think about sense of humor, I think Phil's well up the scale. I think he's got a PhD in it. Phil, how about your motto for, kind of the work theme for the year? How's it looking there?
So anybody who's hung around me for more than like 20 minutes knows that my stock answer whenever somebody asks me how I'm doing is, I'm just happy to be here. And it is admittedly a somewhat flippant answer, but there's a kernel of truth that's always been there, which is I realize that I've been pretty lucky, and I'm not riding around on the back of a garbage truck in Cambodia or something. I've got a pretty good gig, and I'm grateful for it. And that theme has continued through 2020. We got through this. I was somewhat selfishly, I was lucky. I mean, to say I was working from home before this. So my personal amount of transition was pretty low. But now as we're getting into 2021, and a lot of our clients have realized, and our customers, for knowledge, realize that, they've kind of patted themselves down for bullet wounds, realize that they're still standing. Business is doing okay. So again, I'm happy to be here. And still be able to do what I was doing for a company that services clients. So there's still the larger macro world going on, and I don't want to diminish that. But at the end of the day, I'm still grateful that I'm here.
I like that gratefulness. And Jim, I know your brain's not full, so what's your motto for this year?
Well, I have two. One would be more of a theme around long-term thinking and getting away from the quick fixes. And so to play off Tommy's piece about the earthquake, I mean, we've gone through the earthquake. People are safe. Now's the time to sort of build back, but also not focus on the quick fixes. That's sort of, at some point in time, all of the, as you said, stimulus is going to have to end. And at some point in time, you just can't keep shoveling money out the door from a government standpoint. And focus on, what are the things that we can do better to build, as I said, build back our infrastructure, build back our knowledge, and you've seen a lot of the places that in the earthquake that haven't survived. I mean, we had a university declare bankruptcy just recently in Canada, and it wasn't a large university, but the whole idea of looking for a more longer term out is actually going to be important as I don't think we're quite there yet. I'm hopeful that we will get there, but I don't think we're still at that point. My second piece, and now let's go to your brain is not full hat, as it would be, is the whole idea around the transition around skills development and the fact that so many people had to, transition, and the industries that might not be there, whether it be automation, because as we did this, work from home thing, a lot of places said, well, we're not gonna, that whole dynamic is going to change us to the human resources, the skills resources that companies are going to need going forward. And that it works its way down a chain as to how people are going to get those skills, where are they going to get them from, what's going to be needed, right? So I think that that's an important component, and it certainly has changed the dynamic around the whole future of work and how that's going to play out.
Jim, you're on a roll, and actually you're giving me a perfect kind of segue into our fourth question, not our third. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to go to that fourth question. And I want to deal with that question of skills, and so I want to do it from two kind of perspectives here, if I can, with all of you. But I'll start with you, Jim. And the question is, so what were some of those skills? Maybe give me 2 or 3 of them, if you would, that you really felt like were difference makers in getting you transitioning through the first 9 months, obviously the end of 2020 of the pandemic. And are there any skills that you kind of still wish you had in your quiver, if you could, even now, that you think might help you not only get through 2021, but get you beyond that?
I mean, I guess a couple of them. So more along the lines of the sort of a strategic foresight, looking at sort of how are we going to bring out all the different areas of putting together, the plan and strategy and development, but also from it really made me realize sort of the importance of collective intelligence, right? So we always talk about that. So the collective piece that, this is something that's happened to accelerate the collaboration between the medical community, the innovation community, so there's so many different people coming together that needed to, provide different pieces of the puzzles. It would be So I think the whole concept of strategic foresight and collective intelligence are sort of my two top skills. I'm only going to give two, sorry, but that you know, are the ones that we have to do in order to move forward. So I think that, you know, I think that if there's anything that I still want to develop, sort of idea is around sort of the, you know, the knowledge management component. Just, I mean, yes, as a librarian, there are people in the community who are good at that, but I think that there's so much stuff, and it's how do we advocate that we are the people, and people with our skill sets can actually provide a great role within various organizations, companies, associations, in order to be leaders, right?
Tommy, I want to go straight to you on that one, because I mean, again, I see you active in, you know, a variety of association communities. I can't think of anybody that's been more kind of, you know, more digitally pervasive than you over the last year. So, you know, similar kind of question, you know, whether it was ASAE or NILE or any of the other communities that you're really active in, you know, what were those skill sets that, you know, you thought were the big difference makers for you last year? And are there still some you kind of see ahead that you're planning to acquire before this year's out?
So I think what's interesting about when we think about skills and how it got us through 2020, there's a terminology out in the broader business lexicon which I absolutely can't stand, which is soft skills. I think that is one of the worst turns of phrase in the management literature and ecosystem, because really what they are, they're power skills. They're, you know, they're hard skills that help, you know, CI practitioners, you know, putting my old CI hat back on from many moons ago, you know, around scenario planning and information elicitation, you know, all of that helped last year. But if you think about the power skills that CI practitioners have, and they're just sort of innate and core to being successful in this profession, you think about the flexibility, you think about the perseverance, you think about the relationship management skills, either, you know, if you're in the vendor community with the clients you work with or internal within your own organization. You know, those skills are absolutely critical, and you couldn't have survived 2020 without them. And like all skills, I think they're ones that need to be constantly refined, constantly focused on. So I would actually give the same answer to both questions. I think when we think about being flexible, persevering, having that level of resilience and relationship building, I think those are skills that'll carry us, you know, through 2021 the same way that they did through 2020.
If I can ask you a question, Tommy, so many of those social skills can play on also the face-to-face interaction, the getting to know somebody, the, you know, just walking down to somebody's office or cube and saying, hey, you know, you don't know me, but I might have something of interest to you. And a lot of those have been turned off in this. So how have you had to adjust to that in a remote way where you're more reliant on the words on the page or on the screen versus just buying someone a cup of coffee?
So I think one of the most unique elements of the last year or so is something that everybody went through around the world together. And I cannot think of the last time that we all had a shared experience. And the experience that everybody here on the panel, everybody listening to this, we've all gone through something foundationally similar over the last 12 months. And everyone, in some way, shape, or form, was at some point in time deprived of connection, right? You know, whether that's in-person connection, whether that's all everybody trying to figure it out by Zoom, whether that's being zoomed out, right? The connections that we were used to aren't the ones that have carried us through. But this is one of the unique aspects, I think, of the last 12 months, where I think in some ways, you know, fortune favors the bold. I think the people who reach out and the people who are proactive. And for everything I keep seeing about, you know, what is the Zoom fatigue and how there's a sense of overwhelm, there's also still that desire to connect. And I still think people are looking for that. It's central to who they are. It's central to how all the important work of an organization gets done. And, you know, one of the things that I hope perseveres out of the current situation is I think there's been opportunities to reach out and collaborate with people in new ways through this, particularly globally, right? You know, through these technology platforms and everybody getting comfortable with technology platforms, we have a way to connect globally. I was on a conference last month. It took place in Singapore. My head was lowered into the middle of a panel conversation on a TV screen at 3 a.m. Eastern time here in the US, and that's an opportunity that never would have happened beyond that. I'll give you another example. I'm going to be doing a presentation at a conference later on this summer with a gentleman who lives in Amsterdam, who leader in his field. We've had the opportunity to do a couple of articles together. We've appeared at a conference together. One of just the most delightful people to work with through these days and get his insights on. I've never shaken the man's hand. I've never met him in person. We just have that ability. People are still looking for connection, even if that connection looks slightly different than it did a year ago.
So I just want to jump in on that because I have a funny little story. Talking about the adjustments, everyone having to get used to new technology to try and maintain that connection. We, of course, were in session. Everyone is busy and crazy. And we had someone just last week send out a division-wide meeting invite at the last minute because she was trying to test with a one-on-one meeting and was new to the software. And so everyone has this notice popping up. You're late for this meeting that you have that started 5 minutes ago, and it just showed up on your calendar. And the funny thing is the people that actually joined the meeting and were just sitting around waiting because they're not really sure what it was, had such a great time seeing each other's faces that they hadn't seen in 9 months. And, it was kind of this short little, oh, hi, how are you? Okay, well, I don't know what this is. I guess it's really not happening. We'll leave now, but it was great to see you. And, those impromptu, it's no longer in the water cooler. It's, okay, someone sent us a mistake, but we had a great time doing it. But the information skills that I really wanted to share, kind of what Jim was saying, organization. I mean, that's what we librarians pride ourselves in. We're all about. We know how to classify and store that information and make sure you can find it later. And I think this just highlighted how important that is, because when you're no longer there, for us, no longer physical access to a collection, or how much of that physical collection do we have digitized just because we thought it could be useful in the future, never imagining that we wouldn't actually be able to access a collection. But the beauty of having people contact you, and they know, of course, the world that we're in, and they kind of have the, I'm not sure, I don't know if you're going to be able to, and being able to, like, with a snap say, oh, we've got that, here it is, you can continue to keep going because we already have that, I think was really, really important. And then the resourcefulness of CI people. When you don't have access to the things you're used to, but someone over here who might, or someone who knows someone who might, I think that has just been so key through all of this. So those would be my things. And the one thing to maybe acquire is maybe letting go of a little bit of that wanting to dig it up on our own and being more willing to just go straight to asking for the help, because it's going to be a little more difficult.
Yeah, I really like that. And actually, I'm going to build on that, Steph. I'm so glad you shared your illustration of something that actually kind of was serendipitous, where resourcefulness met opportunity. It kind of produced serendipity. And let me go to that for whoever wants to kind of pick up on that. What forced you to change last year that actually created a serendipitous result? What did you end up doing where that resourcefulness and opportunity kind of intersected one another and produced a result that you did not expect going into it? Can you maybe share an example or two of something that went really well because you had to make a change? Who wants to start us off on that? Come on, Jim. I know you can do this. Phil, you want to jump in? What worked really well? Something you did a little differently because of the pandemic that turned and produced good fruits.
So there was, I can think of one client, without going into too many details, who had asked us to research a particular topic, and it was changing just so rapidly that we couldn't give the client an answer. Like what they had asked us to research, we were just like, by the time I tell you, it's obsolete. Like I can't help you there. But it did force them as an organization to look bigger and shift from the what am I doing this quarter, what am I doing next quarter, to how are we restructuring to survive. So back to the earthquake and rebuilding sort of thing. We were able to help a client sort of see that future and shift their focus from something that was, fairly tactical to something that was more strategic. I mean, for lack of better terms, but it was handy to help somebody say, okay, yeah, I mean, I know we're worried about the trees. There's the forest. It's on fire. And this is what we got to do.
Love it. Jim, Tommy, Stephanie, you got another? You want to just add another illustration of, again, something that you were kind of forced into having to make a change, and that change ended up producing a lot better yield than you had expected?
Well, I think for us and our whole state is that, we had to take things virtual. So that means all of our meetings. And when you look at the state of Nevada, we have the capital here in Carson City, the greater Reno area, but our state's majority population is a 7-hour drive away in Las Vegas. And so there's always been that issue with participation and and this can go for everyone, how do you make the couple of remote workers feel like they're truly a part of things? And now that everyone has gone virtual and is participating in the same way, it really levels the playing field. So for both us, our employees that we have in our satellite office in Las Vegas, but on a grander scale, everyone is now participating in the same format, has the same opportunities, and I think that's really helpful.
Absolutely. Great. Jim, Tommy, you have an illustration you guys want to share, or should I move on to another question?
Well, I'm just going to add, quickly add to what Tommy had said earlier about sort of the globalness of things, and I think that's one of the things where people had to do is think more global, and I think that that whole concept of where everything comes from and who's producing what and what opportunities we have and people we can reach out with. I mean, I'm sitting here in Canada, but I've probably in most cases spoken with more people in the United States during the pandemic, or like Tommy said, participated in a conference where one of the panelists was in Sweden, one in South Africa, one in Paris, and it was that whole global nature of things. I think that we're going to have to focus more on as well, because at the beginning of it, there was a lot of talk about reshoring and bringing stuff back, but now it ebbs and flows with the whole globalization piece, and I think that's something to pay more attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's always the two sides of globalization, right? I mean, there's the good side in that, again, we're now kind of compelled to connect with our colleagues in other places. But again, because we're compelled to connect, things like the virus, by the way, also has chances to, spread. So even if we can get it, like New Zealand, as some of you know, up until very recently, they had controlled the spread, but because of global travel and other things, it's virtually impossible. If any place on the globe still has a spreading virus, we're all susceptible to having a spreading virus. So, and again, but there's two sides to that, and that can work for the better or for the worse, and hopefully we'll all manage that. So, by the way, Stephanie, one of our audience members noted that you gave a good illustration of unintended consequences. In this case, obviously positive ones, and it's neat to see that. So, thanks for that comment from Michael Newgarten. Let me go to another question for you. So, what are you doing now to help yourself, and maybe more importantly, to help your colleagues and your clients interact with you professionally in a, and again, in a more efficient and effective way? Can you give me an example or two of, of something you've done maybe recently, maybe even within the last quarter or last 3 months or so that you've put into place that's already making a difference for you? And again, I'll leave that open to any of the four.
Craig, this is Tommy. I think for my organization, what we've tried to do is really use the pandemic as an opportunity to slash through some processes and slash through some dated activities that really weren't adding a lot of value. And so what we've really tried to do is to support really open communication with each other and try to create norms around it's okay to pick up the phone and put 5 minutes on somebody's calendar, right? It doesn't need to be anything more than that, right? I think there's always a traditional formality around meetings that they had to be 30 minutes, they had to be 60 minutes, whatever it was. Reach out, constant contact, lots of sensing and responding that allows, people to feel engaged. You don't have the water cooler anymore, so how do you recreate that in a virtual world and keep people, coming around? Sometimes you can do it at a team level, but sometimes it's got to be a lot of one-on-one interactions to make sure that people feel connected and engaged and secure in a time where that's really tough to come by.
Yeah, I love your water cooler idea, Tommy, too. Not only don't you have it in the office, we don't have it in the community anymore either. And if you think about digital communities as a place to kind of set up some watering holes, so to speak, I see a lot of organizations moving in that. Phil, Jim, Steph, do you have any anything that you've been doing recently that really looks to be helping your colleagues or your clients interact with you in a better way?
Well, just Tommy's point. I mean, that's why we all have now like 55 million chat apps on our phone, because everyone wants to chat digital. No, we're using WhatsApp. No, we're using this, right? Yeah. And then the tech acceleration and helping people with that is something that I've certainly been sort of focusing on, because I think in a lot of cases there are a lot of new tools that are coming out, and what is available to people. And just look at sort of the education space again, where a lot of places, I did some stuff with some community colleges here in Canada where they had to really pivot, in the sense that how do you teach culinary skills online? How do you teach even nursing online? How do you do and so there's some adaptive work being done, but at the same point in time, it's just the overwhelmingness of all the technology that is coming forward to people, and helping them to sort that out is actually something I think that a lot of people in this area have been pretty helpful with, and are able to sort of look at what are the options out there, and then analyze that and point them out to people. So I think the technology aspect is big.
And Tommy, you're heading straight into the clubhouse after this, right? That's an inside joke about one of the growing social communities that has probably been buzzing some people's inboxes of late. Any other big changes again that you're making kind of now that you think is going to help you either build a better team, or help you build a better relationships with your clientele?
So I'll jump in there and echo what Jim just said. Part of it is the acceleration. So our company, most of us have been working remotely prior to this, so we were a little more used to it. But getting our clients used to doing video calls instead of audio conference calls in lieu of being on site, if only to read body language and tell if what the message you're trying to land is landing. So things such as that have we've had to do, which again is not necessarily in the research role, but if you've communicated something and it's not understood, then you haven't really communicated it. So that's one thing that's done. The other thing is just helping people understand that all the trends we saw before the pandemic are still there. They're just accelerating. So if, they're like, I came out of retail, so I always look at retail, and the stores that have closed, they were going to close anyway. They were going to die anyway. They just, unfortunately, were euthanized instead of having a long lingering suffering. And that happened in so many different sectors. So helping people understand that all of the trends that were there before are there, they're just on steroids, is something else we've helped some of our clients understand as well.
That's great. We're actually kind of nearing the end of our time together. I know some of you guys have hard stops at the top of the hour. So let me just do one quick reminder here for those of you that want to join us next month, and I hope you will. It's March 24th. You'll see over in the chat pane, you can register for the upcoming webinar that's going to be on financial tools. It's going to kind of walk you through all you need to know, at least in an hour setting. But believe me, you'd be amazed at what our two experts are going to pack into that hour. So please register for that if you haven't already. And I want to finish up. Well, we've been answering some of the questions in the background here, and for those of you who still have them, you will have shortly the access to our panelists and myself. But I want to ask you to think ahead for a second, and I want to write the headline. I want you to write it, if you don't mind. what is the headline that's going to be written on, at the end of the year? Let's say December 31st, that touts what you accomplished professionally. And I realize we're having to get you to step out on a limb here to write that, but I did ask you to think about that. So I'm going to start with Tommy. Tommy, what's the headline going to be that's going to be touting your professional accomplishments when this year has finally ended, if it ever ends?
I think the headline is going to tout that hopefully I was successful in accomplishing whatever my goals were for the year that weren't what they were on February 18th. I think we have to be flexible and know that we've got to be successful no matter what comes at us. So I hope there's a good news story at the end, but I think the subject of the story is probably going to be different than maybe what I even think it is right now.
I kind of think of the Fantastic Four, Tommy, and I see you as Mr. Fantastic. He bent and he got shaped into whatever was needed. So anyway, I could see that being it. Steph, same. What's the news headline going to be on December 31st there in Nevada and in and around the state legislature as they tout your accomplishments?
Well, most of us librarians don't like to be headlines, so that's an interesting one. So our happiest headline would be if it is somewhat sort of back to business as usual, and that everyone is getting all the information, everything that they need. They feel things went as it was supposed to, and they have a little more sense of normalcy back.
Yeah, I like that. A lot less uncertainty, or sometimes we talk at Aurora about undercertainty. We've reduced that, and people can feel confident going out and interacting in ways that they're needing to do. Phil, what's your headline going to read?
Didn't just survive, but thrived. I'm hoping that a lot of us can emerge from this stronger, understanding the sort of the big rocks, to use a Stephen Coveyism, understand what's important and help ourselves professionally and help our clients or internal stakeholders professionally as well.
Love it. Love it. Jim, headline, December 31st there in Canada.
Ottawa Senators win the Stanley Cup, but not going to happen anyhow.
That's not happening.
No, seriously, I think that I'm going to go to the globalization piece, and I think that we're going to see more building around sort of global sensibility and more interactions with all different countries. And I know that we've had 2020 was difficult with the U.S. election, and there are difficulties with even the beginning of the pandemic, where we originally saw stuff with the sort of people looking and blaming China for the pandemic and the sort of steps that were taken there. So I think I just want to see something towards global cooperation is the headline, but I think that's going to be important more than ever.
I like that mind shift, that mindset shift that you're referring to too. And again, and taking control of our own fate and of our own luck and of our own uncertainty or certainty. So that's great. So I'm going to finish this up in the last 2 or 3 minutes that we have. Was there any question that I probably should have asked one of you that you want to make sure that we put on the table so that our audience members can take away something that that you feel particularly strong about? I'll let any one of you guys go ahead and jump in on that one. Again, something I should have been asking you that I didn't. Uh-oh, I'm seeing lots of head shaking. It's not going in the right direction. If there's nothing, I'll leave it. Phil, come on.
You've got it covered. You've got it covered.
Yeah, well, I got Jim sitting here wanting the Ottawa Senators to win the Stanley Cup when it's probably more likely they get the #1 draft pick next year. But
hey,
anyway,
we had 3 first-round draft picks last year. Like, that's excellent. So
the future is bright, and that's going to be true for all of us as information professionals. But listen, on that note, let me thank each of you. This has been fun, and I really wanted you guys to reflect and kind of wanted to have a broad range, conversation around some of what we've learned and some of what we're still learning and some of which we still hope to learn. So, on behalf of the SLA, CIC, obviously, and for those of you who are serving in it, Phil, Jim, Stephanie and Tommy also, thanks to all of you for participating in this. it's going to be an interesting time for us. I mean, that was the word I think we saw more than anything. And I went back and looked at Google searches over the last year. And of course, coronavirus was 4 of the top 5 searches had something to do with coronavirus. Oh, by the way, the other one was, no surprise, the elections, right? But you know, there's still a lot of that, and that's not going to go away. And even though a lot of us are fatigued, you know, this is a great time. This is, and several of you really, I think, brought that to the forefront. It's a great time to be an information professional. If there was ever a time we were needed, it's now. And it's a great time to be learning. It's a great time to be adapting. It's a great time to be resilient. And that's the reason we brought you all in. So thanks again for that. For those of you who want to listen to this, again, there will be a recording available of it post today. It'll be available. We'll let you know when that's going to be. Go ahead and register for the March 24 session. And a big thank you, not only to our STEAM panel, but to our audience today. We're thrilled that you were with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in March. Have a great day or evening, wherever you happen to be. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Frank.
Bye-bye.